Hopefully this will be interesting. It's a somewhat dry subject, but whatever. Let's jump into it, shall we? So, how do I compute my actual EV range? Right. So, this is actually coming out of last Friday when I was going down to Corpus. I came across some poor guy who just bought a naughty Q4, whatever it is, and he only had 61 miles of range left in his car, and he was stuck there in Victoria. And he was coming from Corpus. He was going to Houston, and what he was saying was there's no more Electrify America stations between there are none between Houston and Corpus, so he's kind of stuck. Um, so I mean, part of me is like, yeah, that sucks, and the other part of me is going like, well, this poor guy. I mean, he actually thought the salesman lied to him. What I told him was the salesman probably just didn't know enough information. Okay, so where do you start from? All right, so first of all, I created a chart, and basically, like in my Tesla, it shows the energy usage in terms of watt hours per mile, right? So the watt hours per mile are on the left side. Going down the center is the miles per kilowatt. And then on the right side is a couple of notes that help bring some reality into what's going on. Okay, so if your car shows 200 watt hours per mile, that means it gets 5 miles per kilowatt. So why does that matter? Okay, so the Model Y long range, so I have two cars in my garage. One of them is Model Y long range. The EPA estimate is 330 miles. The battery pack in my car, at least in my testing, is 71. Some people say it should be 72. I don't know, my experience is 71, but we're only talking about a difference of 1 kilowatt. So if you look at 330, that translates to 4.7 miles per kilowatt, which translates down to 212.8 watt hours per mile. Now, have I ever seen anything that low in my Model Y? Only once. And the time I saw it, I was doing a 30 mile per hour range test. Now, does that mean that the EPA estimate is false or misleading? Not really. It's just, it'd be nice to know how they estimated it. So the way I look at it is, let's look at it like you're driving 45 miles an hour and that's what you do your estimate on. I'm guessing that'd be somewhat close to what this is. That's not what they do, but that's the way I look at it. And the manufacturer has a choice of several different tests that they can do. And the manufacturer themselves do the test. So anyway, saying that my Model Y long range can do 330 miles is not anything I plan on. And I kind of knew that when I bought the car. Okay, so if you can get 250 watt hours per mile, which I typically do driving in mixed use, that's equivalent to 4 miles per kilowatt. I don't think of in terms of what the range is because that's around town. Now, if I'm on the highway, and typically on the highway I'm doing 65, 75, 70 miles an hour. Even if the range goes up to 80, I tend not to go 80 too much. So that roughly translates to 3.7 miles per kilowatt. Okay, and it will show 270 watt hours per mile. Okay, whatever. The last item on this list is 500 watt hours per mile. So the Rivian R1T and the Ford F-150 Lightning, they both get something, they get actually somewhat less than 2 kilowatts or 2 miles per kilowatt. So anyway, I just do 500. I don't know exactly what they get. I'm not really a big truck guy. Yes, trucks are nice to have when you need to carry stuff in the bed, but it's money, and if you don't really need it, then why do you have it? On the other hand, my Model Y has a tow hitch, so I can hook up a trailer if I need to. Okay, so that's the table. Okay, the formula idea here. Okay, so Tesla usually shows their energy use in terms of watt hours per mile. To really compute usable mileage, we need to convert watt hour per mile to miles per kilowatt. Then multiply that by, whoops, somebody didn't edit this before they started publishing. Okay, by usable kilowatts in the car. Okay, as I said, my Model Y is a 71. Okay, so then I'm adding a few words. You should make allowances for the low end and high end that you don't use. So the high end that you don't use is typically for a typical battery. You don't want to go to 100% charge. Now, part of it is it takes a long time to charge all the way to 100%. But the more important reason is, as you're charging up to 100%, the battery is going through processes that shorten the life of the battery. So if you were to ask me, well, I typically set my reserve or my upper limit to 80%, actually, is what I do. But anyway, you shouldn't go to 100% unless you have an LFP battery. And the LFP is a different subject altogether. Okay, the low end reserve, the question is, how comfortable are you? There's no right way to say it, I guess. How comfortable are you? How far can you drive down to before you start having a heart attack over getting that low? I can tell you that the Tesla navigation, it typically is looking at 12 to 15% reserve when making choices. Now, the other day when I was driving back from Three Rivers, it was going to allow me to go down to 5%. But then eventually it redid the cut. So the car will keep calculating as you drive along. It'll recalculate how much you can drive with. So I live in Lago Vista. There's a supercharger in Cedar Park. And after a certain period of time, the car eventually calculated, yes, we want to stop in Cedar Park to get at least some charge before you make it all the way home. So, and it was estimated I was going to arrive in Cedar Park with 5%. So, anyway, whatever. To be fair, I know that I can take 5% on a good, well, no, on most days actually. On most days, 5% will get me from Cedar Park to my house. But then I would have been arriving at 0, and if something happened, I would run out of energy on the road. But anyway, whatever. Gradually, the estimate came back up to 10%, and with 10%, it's like, no, I don't need to stop. Okay. So I have my usual disclaimer. Make sure you verify my logic. I'm known to make math errors. Don't apply this without some verification. Okay, so in actual practice, so in real life, what does this mean? So like I said, the Model Y long range has an EPA estimate of 330 miles. Sorry, for some reason I have 333 stuck in my mind. I just looked at my sticker and it says 330. Okay. And my testing, I've gotten 71 kilowatt hours usable. So that all translates down to 212.8 watt hours per mile. Okay, and so my Model Y Opare usually gets around 270 watt hours per mile. That's highway driving. So that's around 262 miles. And for me, that sounds about right. Usually when I talk to people, I tell them, well, count on 240, but whatever. You know, we're arguing about relatively small numbers now. All right, so what does this mean to Ray? First of all, being aware of the impacts driving 8 miles per hour made me reconsider slowing down. Do I want to go 70 miles an hour in an 80 zone? No, I don't. I hate that. But yes, I actually do drive 70 more often. So Friday when I was driving down the road, the speed limit was 75. Um, I was still doing 70, just because I knew it made a difference. Okay, so the other side of it. So I have two Teslas in my garage, right? So the other Tesla in my garage is a used Model 3 Performance. So being aware what should be possible allowed me to take a chance on buying that Model 3, because I know the Model 3 should be getting better than 250 watt hours per mile. Should. And actually, it's kind of coming down to that. It's just retooling, reprogramming my brain to not push it quite as hard. And so my last note here is, I got a Joe TDI. That's a 2013 actually. When I bought it, the estimate was it would get 40 miles per gallon. Now, when I took a trip out west, I found that out in West Texas, it was not getting, I think it was getting like 37 and a half, something like that, miles per gallon. So you had to sit there and think about, well, okay, the speed limit's higher, so I am going over 70. And the other part is you're gaining elevation. So the gaining of elevation is also impacting the mileage. So while some of you might, well, that's an electric car thing. Well, it also applied to my diesel car, right? You didn't think of it quite the same way, but it's the same basic concepts. Anyway, I hope this works. It helps, how other people might interpret this it all depends upon how you look at it, right? But the real basis for coming up with this was that poor guy in the Audi who is now finding out that you have to be aware of what your watt hour per mile usage is. Now, do you really have to do that a lot? No. And if you're in a Tesla, you don't think about it. I mean, but just being aware of this helps set your expectations. I mean, just like with my Model 3 Performance. Does it have great acceleration? Yes, it does. Oh yeah, I love playing with that. But I don't play with it when I'm on a trip where energy efficiency, energy use is important. Because doing all the hot dogging is bringing me up over 300 watt hours per mile, which is bringing my miles per kilowatt down to around 3. So I won't be able to go as far. But anyway, peace and harmony. I hope this is somewhat interesting. Don't just buy a car. Oh, so I should say that, I'm sorry. So for the poor guy with the Audi, if he'd taken a test drive, and if he had gotten the watt hours per mile, he could have taken this formula and figured out what his actual usable range would be. And that would set his expectations. So the counterpart to this is, when I test drove the Model 3 Performance at the Tesla store, my first test drive, so I took 2, right? So in the first test drive, even when I was trying to be conservative, my energy use was still fairly high. Now I took a second test and I got the numbers down to some extent, but still there was high usage mixed in. So I couldn't really compare it to my Model Y, which I'm getting down around 250, even under 250, but there's not much highway mileage in there. It's mostly local 40 mile-per-hour stuff. Anyway, I hope there's some use to this, and for those of you who actually need to apply it, you can. That's what the purpose is, to share. Don't. You should always try out what you're going to do in a local relatively conservative test before you try to apply it to a cross-country trip, even if it's just a few hundred miles. Anyway, there you go. Good luck.